sure he's right. An obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Say it! Say it!
All right, I'll say it.
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
We're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
War. This is the end game.
All right, everybody. It is Friday, March 21st, 2025, the 61st day of the Golden Age. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. Whatever, you know. So it's Friday. We've got so much to talk about. I hope all of you are doing absolutely just so well out there in the world. Let's go ahead and get right into it. We're going to pick up just a little bit where we left off the other day, talking about Spacemen and JFK files and whatnot. Just a little bit. Nothing to upset anyone out there. I know that these topics upset many people. Why don't you like the space dolphins? They're not space dolphins. They're just normal dolphins near a spaceship. I get it. I get it. This is Donald Trump from Today in the Oval Office.
Astronauts that you just helped save from space, they didn't get any overtime pay for all that extra time. They got $5 a day per diem. For 286 days, that is $1,430 in extra pay. Is there anything the administration can do to get them, to make them whole?
Well, nobody's ever mentioned this to me. If I have to, I'll pay it out of my own pocket. Okay, I'll get it for them. I'll take care of that. I like that. I think that's. I'll pay it right out of my. Is that all? That's not a lot for what they had to go through. And I want to thank Elon Musk, by the way, because think if we don't have him. You know, there's only so long, even though they're in the capsule up there, that the body starts to deteriorate after 9 or 10 months and gets really bad after 14, 15 months with the bones and the blood and all the things that you've been reporting on very well. And if we don't have Elon, they could be up there a long time. Who else is going to get him? And I just want to thank him. He's going through a lot, what they're doing to him.
And we will talk about what they're doing to him a little later on. But I mean, thank goodness for Elon Musk. Otherwise, that story that started in the last few years, or, you know, obviously last year, that particular part of it, about Gilligan's Island in space, if it wasn't for Elon Musk, they could have been there forever, because how else would they have ever been retrieved? They would have been stuck on the spaceship forever, or on the space station. Sorry. Don't mean to make it seem like I'm not taking it that seriously. I know it's extremely serious. All the science and these people's lives, and look at her hair and all of it. I get it. They would have never come home. Donald Trump is going to pay out of his own pocket their overtime benefits, and he has his way. They're not going to be taxed on that overtime that he gives them out of his own pocket. And of course, who knows if they'll even report that as income? I mean, especially if he's just, you know, just passing off $100 bills, just scraping them right off his big pile. 14 of them each, 1,400 for each of you out of my own pocket. Declare it or don't declare it. He also talked about the JFK files today in the Oval Office. think this was another Peter Ducey question. Peter Ducey is just firing them off all over the place.
Any questions?
President Trump,
Peter?
80,000 pages of documents is a lot to sift through. Can you just tell us who killed Kennedy?
Well, I was given the task of releasing that because many presidents have gone through it and they haven't released. And I said, release. We even released Social Security numbers. I didn't want anything deleted. They said, so what about Social Security? People long gone, but they're long gone, so I can't imagine. But I said, if you don't delete it, if you do delete it, we have people are going to say, why did you delete it? There's something in it. So we gave Social Security and we gave everything. And the rest is for you to look at, Peter. You're going to see whether or not you see anything. But we've given it. We're doing it with Dr. Martin Luther King, too. They're preparing all of that. They're going to release everything. And whoever else they want. I mean, we have nothing. We really have nothing to hide. We shouldn't have. When a lot of time goes by. But with the Kennedy files, in particular, they were going crazy on them. I don't think there's anything that's earth-shattering, but you'll have to make that determination. In those, it's 80,000. It's actually 88,000, and we have some additional things, as you know, come out today. And for that, you can go to the offices and you can see whatever you want to see. Everything is out there, totally open. The additional stuff is available later on today. You go over to the offices and you can have it immediately. And you'll make a determination.
So the people are going to have to determine for themselves who killed John F. Kennedy, because all of the official records still say that it was Lee Harvey Oswald. And the revelation has not come. The smoking gun has not come. He asked Donald Trump straight, who was it? Said, check it out, determine for yourself. So I guess it is going to be left to the people. All right, so we will leave those subjects behind for most of today, I think. And let us begin with another very interesting statement from Elon Musk. This is shot like he's doing a stand-up comedy special on Netflix. And apparently it's just from Tesla Live.
Generally, I find that the most interesting outcome is the most likely. Or said another way, maybe the most entertaining outcome, especially if ironic, is the most likely. It's almost like we're in an alien Netflix series that's trying to have the highest possible ratings. And like, if you think about it, like, that's kind of what happens, which it doesn't mean it's always good. Because to your point, if you wouldn't really want to watch a show where things are great and stay great. I'm like, oh, that's boring. You want to watch a show where there's like a narrative arc where things go up and they go down, they go back up again. And you don't know exactly what's going to happen next. And I think we might be in an alien Netflix series here. So we're just going to keep the ratings up so we don't get canceled. All right, thank you, guys.
Now, that's a point that he has made before. He made it a few years ago in an interview with Tucker Carlson. The most entertaining outcome when viewed from a detached third party is the most likely. And he says, he adds the layer of irony, and he explains that at greater length in the interview from Tucker. And you know what? We might as well just add that on.
But faith, the most ironic outcome is the most likely, it seems.
I'm stealing that. That's good.
That's actually a friend of mine, Jonah, who came up with that one. I actually have a slight variant on that, which is the most entertaining outcome is the most likely. But that's entertaining as viewed from a third-party viewer.
Right.
Like, so if we're like an alien
from
TV
on
show.
High. Yes.
Yeah. Like you could go see a movie about World War I, and they're being blown to bits and they're gassed and everything in the trenches, and it's like you're eating popcorn and having a soda. It's fine. Not so great for the people in the movie.
True.
But that's my variant on this sort of Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is most likely. Jonah's variant, which is irony, and then my variant, which is the most entertaining as seen by a third-party audience. which seems to be mostly true.
So it seems to be mostly true. He's talking about, in the newer video, a narrative arc, and that is something that we discuss all the time because this is just one evolving story. And we've discussed at great length what that narrative arc would then imply about the reality of many of these situations. And so there's a few different ways to look at that. But what we're getting are stories that will maintain our attention and direct us toward various conclusions. And it seems to be admitted by people like Donald Trump and Elon Musk on a fairly regular basis. You know, John Harold Patel Patriot often points out, he often cites that Donald Trump speech when he decided to let the country know that he would be running again for president in the fake campaign beginning back just after the midterms in 2022, talking about psychological operations being run on the American people. And so we've been victim to those for quite a long time. And even if you think space is entirely real and that we've traveled to outer space and landed on the moon and that all of that stuff is real, it's undoubtedly also a psyop. There's no way to just skip past that part. In fact, you know, while we're on the subject, I was maybe I won't be able to find it. Somebody dropped in the Telegram chat earlier a link to a couple posts from a year or so ago, just spaceship video where the spaceship would glitch out in the video. It would just disappear, like the microphone sliding behind, cutting through Joe Biden's hand, nonsense like that. A video of an astronaut climbing back into a space shuttle or something, pulling the hatch down over his head, but the hatch was made of some kind of flimsy material. There's an element to which we are just being given stories, and those stories are then manufacturing our consent in one direction or another. And we have to then hope that our consent is being manufactured to some good ends. But that, as I have said many times, and I know that some people disagree with this, but it seems awfully difficult to assume that consent is being manufactured in a productive direction when it is being done through nonstop lies and psyops. And so people will ask, you know, some of the reaction after the Spaceman splashdown was, why would they lie to us about these things? They must be real, because, like, what are you saying, that Elon Musk is lying about things? Well, I don't know. Is he telling you the full truth about things? Maybe that's a better way to approach it. Do you think Elon Musk is sharing with the public everything he knows about all the situations he discusses as the leading recipient of Defense Department contracts? I would suggest that the answer to that is quite obviously no. And so once you've accepted that, then it's just a matter of figuring out how much a character like Elon, and I'm not casting aspersions on Elon by saying this, he has a position and a role that requires certain narrative elements to be divulged by him, certain information to be divulged, certain information to be withheld. Where's that line? If he's withholding information and not delivering the entire truth, which is itself a form of dishonesty, is it then a greater form of dishonesty to say, like, we're doing X, Y, Z, even if they're not doing it, even if those stories are just being projected to affect some different result down the line? Everybody's got to make these determinations. And again, it's not that if you find out they're being dishonest to a level that you don't approve of, that all of a sudden they're the enemy or the bad person or whatever it might be, though they might be that as well. You simply have to start demanding truth. And until people do demand truth on these things, understanding that they might be getting lied to, then you can't really take that next step. Now, a lot of people continue to point this out, that the source somehow of all this propaganda, what allows for all this propaganda, is the Obama administration's repeal, or, you know, people refer to it as a repeal. They didn't actually repeal the Smith-Mundt Act. They added the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act to the National Defense Authorization Act, I think of 2012, or maybe it was 2013, if memory serves. But so a lot of people pointed this out this week. I don't know what it was that brought all this back around into the conversation, but Mike Benz on Joe Rogan from a couple of months back talking about the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act and how this facilitated propaganda, not only in the United States, but around the world. And so let's take a look at that.
Are you familiar with the Smith-Mundt Act?
Is that the 2011, 2012 thing where Obama allowed people to use propaganda against United States citizens?
Yeah, that was what was done then under Obama, was the effective repeal of it. It was called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. But the modernization got rid of the whole purpose of it, the firewall, because at the time, the media and media control was seen as the linchpin crux of winning the Cold War, piping in pro-U.S. Media influence because everything moved after World War II from kinetic warfare and military occupation. You know, we used to militarily occupy the Philippines, for example, after we won.
You know, I'm just going to pause that for just 1 second, because, and again, not casting aspersions on Mike Benz. I like a lot of what Mike Benz has done. When we're talking about the Cold War and looking back on these things, understanding the inversions, understanding the global regime and its purpose coming out of World War II, and the push toward full top-down control over the entire world, the one world international rules-based order. That was who was fighting the Cold War. And the justification was always that they were shutting down communism all around the world. Well, a top-down one world global order is global communism. It can't be something other than that. The state is all powerful and owns everything. We're talking about the global state overall. So the idea that the communications around the world were being done to destabilize countries and then overthrow countries for a good reason, because those were communists and they were doing bad things to their people, and this is what America needed to do. I think all of that is up for review and serious questioning. So the idea that it was at some point, the propaganda that we were feeding into these other countries, the idea that it was good for a time, I think is incredibly suspect. I think Mike Benz doubts that less than I do. I've heard him talk about this many times. And again, I know people like Mike Benz. I like Mike Benz. I've heard him talk about this many times. I think I would disagree with him about the benefits we expected to achieve, the justifications given. And let's just continue.
The Spanish-American War. But that was banned under international law, territorial acquisition by military force in 1948. So we had to win elections, and we had to influence the passage of laws in foreign countries by having an apparatus inside those countries that influenced the hearts and minds of people, which influenced who they voted for, which then determined the government. So you had to move towards political vassalage rather than military occupation. And what the Smith-Mundt Act did is, simultaneous with the creation of this in 1948, Congress recognized the Frankensteinian monster they were creating by authorizing a covert, permanent Department of Dirty Tricks, and this is their phrase, not mine, to do this cloak and dagger, to infiltrate and co-opt the universities, the unions, the media, the politicians, the judges, the whole swarm army. You know, what I have been calling for a long time the USA Truman Show, because it's, you know, these people in these foreign countries have no idea, you know, how many things they interact with that are effectively a movie set being constructed by the U.S. State Department and its sister influence orgs. But the point that I'm getting at here is the Smith-Mundt Act in 1948 said, okay, you guys can do this. State Department can do this. CIA can do this. USAID, when it came along 13 years later, could do this. But so there was a guy named Frank Wisner who was known as one of the godfather figures of the CIA. He's known for creating what was called the Wisner's Wurlitzer, which was it's like a church organ, and that he would brag that he could play media like a symphony to make any media narrative go viral in any country on earth because of the suite of CIA proprietary media functions and its distribution network, especially when the U.S. had first mover advantage in radio and print. It's basically the U.S. and U.K. were the only games in town really in having robust radio, film, TV, and print media. So the Smith-Mundt said, okay, you can do that abroad. You can plant fake news stories in France. You can have propaganda blare into Africa or Western Europe or Central Asia, but that can't come home. You can't psyop our own people with your propaganda organ abroad, because the point of authorizing this is that we get cheaper gas, we get import-export markets, we get a high standard of living, because if a foreign government doesn't want to give up its resources or allow a U.S. military base or allow joint partnerships or exports of goods or U.S. multinational corporations to operate there, then the American people suffer economically. So it was always designed to say, listen, you can do this dirty stuff abroad, but it can't come home. And even that protection, which lasted for 70 years, and we only lost it a decade ago. We're up against a much actually deeper, darker problem with this USAID scandal, and as people will see increasingly, the scandals that will break open at the Pentagon and the State Department, which is that we have a Smith-Mundt problem for funding and operations. It's not just propaganda. The blob, foreign policy establishment, can fund groups that effectively work with prosecutors domestically, or that work at media, dual use. We give them foreign grants to do media propaganda abroad, but they operate here. Or social media censorship, to coerce foreign countries to pass foreign censorship laws that explicitly and are intended to attack U.S. social media companies and in U.S. peer-to-peer speech. So we need that protection. If we're going to keep this function at all, we need a hard firewall and absolute grotesque penalties for any violation.
All right. So I understand that people in the Rumble feed are having problems. Rumble itself could be having problems. On my end, I can refresh the Rumble feed and bring it right up to the present moment, as far as I can tell. Maybe it's a little bit behind. Interesting. Well, yeah, maybe it stopped at 19 minutes. That is very strange. The Rumble feed on the Rumble end says that it is still going. I am not sure exactly what can be done about that, if anything. The stream is available on Substack. It is available on YouTube. You can find me on YouTube at I'm Your Moderator. So head on over there. Subscribe if you can. That would be a big help, by the way, to increase the YouTube subscriber numbers, because that unlocks other features on YouTube. But we're going to have to just continue one way or another. There are other live feeds going on out there. Apologies for the Rumble issue. And as usual, that will probably affect me considerably worse than it will affect you. So good times, everybody. Good times. All right. So you heard Mike Benz talking about the Smith-Mundt Act and how that protected the United States from the propaganda efforts that were being initiated abroad in order to overthrow governments and bring those governments into the quote unquote Western fold, to make them do what we needed them to do, purportedly to combat communism. It clearly was not for that. And of course, you watch the very same regime that was running that propaganda in foreign countries then prop up the Chinese Communist Party. And who knows how many other communist organizations, dictatorships, what have you. It also just does happen to be global communism. The agenda is the agenda. So the idea that we were somehow toppling communism worldwide, and that the proponents of the one world liberal international rules-based order were propagandizing nations around the world for that purpose is obviously wrong. The purpose was to bring them under the control of that one world global order. It has always been that, hence the blowback. Now, Ben's allowed for the possibility that maybe we shouldn't have that going on anywhere. But if we're going to, but says if we're going to have it going on anywhere, we at least need to make sure that there is this firewall here, and that firewall was totally removed when the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act was implemented. Now, I suggested earlier in the week that if you believe that repealing the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act is going to eliminate propaganda, government propaganda in the United States of America, then you yourself have consumed too much propaganda. And I'm not accusing Mike Benz of propagandizing the American people with this. I'm sure he's just trying to educate them as to how these things have operated in the past, or maybe he is, I don't know. But we did not just become subject to government propaganda 13 years ago with the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. It's not like there was some shortage of government propaganda looking to subvert and overthrow governments here, whether it's state or local governments or the federal government. We saw the same kinds of color revolution strategies that are employed around the world and that have been employed around the world for decades, employed here in the United States of America. Black Lives Matter, Me Too, stuff like that. That stuff did not just start in the Obama era. It might have gotten kicked up to a much higher level. Maybe we saw the volume turned up to 11 during the Obama era and since, but it was going on before then. It's also entirely possible that we have become cognizant of it in this era. So maybe it's a good thing. But changing the law is not going to stop the government from propagandizing us. And if we continue to look to government for all of these solutions, then we are in some sense just giving up. We are giving away our own power to change these sorts of outcomes. Eventually, what needs to happen is that we need to simply stop believing that the things we see on television are true. And there's no law in the world that's going to solve that problem if we're unwilling to solve that problem ourselves. The idea that our solutions must always be sought from the government is part of the problem. Asking the government for the solutions will never be the answer. I am going to pause for a moment and just take another look at Rumble to see if it has corrected the problem. And gosh, it has not. So I guess I'm going to have to, I guess I'm just going to have to restream this episode on Rumble at some point. I'm not sure if it's possible to create another Rumble stream on the fly. That is extremely unfortunate. Let me see if it is possible, and forgive me for this. I know that this is going to be a bit of a pain while we hold for processing. You know, I'm not sure that I can do it without ending the other stream, and then that will end the rest of the streams. So apparently we are just screwed for now. And I'm going to have to contact them over at Rumble. That is incredibly frustrating. It is not the easiest thing in the world to prepare for a 2 or 3 hour live stream only to be thwarted by the technology. All right. What a fun week we've had, everybody. Holy moly. Okay, so let's move to America First Legal. This week, they have, actually just yesterday, they released this report, as they often do. They will put out evidence of various government malfeasance that they are dealing with. And we can hope that their dealings when it comes to big tech censorship are much further down the road than we are aware of. There were a series of big tech censorship class action lawsuits filed by Donald Trump, I think in 2021, could be 2022, but I think it was 21. And I think the Twitter one was dismissed. One of them was dismissed and then appealed. And there's no outcome on that appeal, to as far as I'm aware. These eventually have to be settled, and the people have to be made whole, myself included among those people, for the government censoring us directly with ample proof. You can simply go to the Judicial Watch documents from back in 2021 showing my face in a request from the California Secretary of State's office to the big tech social media companies through their portals that were arranged for the Secretary of State's offices to be reporting any instances of election mis, dis, or malinformation to be brought down by the social media companies. There was a video I did posted by my friend, the actress Samita Armstrong, from a Gavin Newsom recall signing event that we participated in. And I was talking about how the California Secretary of State had switched my voter registration to permanent mail-in ballot only without my knowledge or consent. All of that was entirely factually true. I was stating the truth about what the California Secretary of State's office had done. And that post, of course, because she was an actress with a fairly sizable following, was getting a lot of views, and that would be very harmful to their cause of switching everyone to universal mail-in ballot only without their knowledge or consent. So they submitted a request through a portal to the big tech companies to have that post taken down. And within a few days, I was no longer, I had one of the first instances of my account being locked on Twitter. And within the next 6 weeks, my Twitter account was banned, gone for the next 2 years. My Instagram account was banned. A Facebook employee eventually then helped me get that account back. At some point, and by the way, I'm not suggesting that my experience is unique at all. In fact, Americans without podcasts and without famous actresses for friends were also banned from the platforms. People do need to be made whole. Pardon me for 1 second. I want to post a notice for people to come check out the YouTube. It seems like the YouTube chat is actually filled up fairly well, so that is certainly nice. Hold for processing. All right, there we are. For those of you listening to the podcast version, I apologize for these interruptions, which I know listening later on the audio are significantly more annoying. Okay, so from aflegal.org, America First Legal exposes censorship scheme by USAID and Global Engagement Center working with UK government and media firms to use AI censorship tools. Today, America First Legal released explosive new documents obtained through ongoing litigation against the U.S. Department of State's Global Engagement Center, exposing a vast government-backed censorship operation to silence Americans under the guise of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. And as mentioned the other day, by the way, this litigation is they're working directly, AFL is, with Mike Benz and the, what is it called? The Foundation for Freedom Online. Sorry. So they're working directly with him. The other day, we talked about Trump's new presidential action declaring as president that misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation and cognitive infrastructure would no longer be considered critical infrastructure as they were under the fake and illegitimate Biden administration. The documents reveal a disturbing alliance between the GEC, the US AID, the British Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, and media censorship organizations, all working in lockstep to manipulate public discourse, control media narratives, and suppress speech. The GEC, which was forced to shut down in December 2024, was designed to combat foreign disinformation abroad. However, through Freedom of Information Act requests, AFL uncovered that the GEC engaged in state-sponsored propaganda, repeatedly using willing participants from private media organizations. Further, AFL's lawsuit against the GEC revealed that USAID had created an internal disinformation primer that explicitly praised private sector censorship strategies and recommended further censorship tactics. The new documents show the GEC and USAID coordinated efforts to censor COVID-19 misinformation and counter COVID-19 propaganda. The GEC collaborated with officials in the British Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office on disinformation efforts. The GEC coordinated with private media censorship firms, including Pointer and NewsGuard, which provided samples of its misinformation fingerprints, artificial intelligence tool designed to identify and rate websites based on their perceived misinformation, and to then label them and set them up for easier censorship. And so they go through the documents in the rest of this article. I would encourage you to give that a look on your own if you are interested in this particular topic. And I think it's particularly interesting that they are talking about the British Commonwealth, and we're going to come back to that in just a few moments. The idea that the American federal government is censoring the American people in direct violation of their First Amendment rights on behalf of the global regime and in coordination with foreign governments should be all we need to know to understand that our country has been overthrown, or had been overthrown, or perhaps has always been in league with foreign governments. But no matter what the ultimate truth of that situation turns out to be, and no matter how we ultimately understand that, we can know that our government, as we see it, is acting in direct opposition to the people, a government supposedly of, by, and for the people, on behalf of foreign entities. Now, whether that is just global governance organizations on behalf of the regime central banking apparatus, or whether it's just coordinated with our good pals over there in the UK, our government is facilitating the direct violation of our First Amendment rights to speech, association, freedom of thought. We are basically being accused preemptively of thought crimes. This person has spread mis and dis and malinformation, and therefore their speech must be cut off from anyone else's access, for the potential that they will commit future thought crimes and future speech crimes. It's 1984 in real life. Taking another look here at Rumble. Okay, Rumble is still going to be down. All right, so let's go to the Washington Post, or sorry, the Wall Street Journal opinion section this week. Defunding Voice of America is a win for China and Iran. So Voice of America is one of those media organizations like Radio Free Europe. Mike Benz was just discussing them. I think Tucker Carlson's dad worked for Voice of America. This is one of the organizations that is set up abroad to propagandize the populations of other countries around the world and get them to believe that their government is abusing, oppressing them, etc. And what they should really do is support U.S. interests in those countries. So these are foreign propaganda missions in other nations. After a tense cabinet meeting this month, during which Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other department heads criticized Elon Musk's sweeping dismissals of federal workers, President Trump told Mr. Musk to use a scalpel rather than a hatchet when recommending future job cuts. Now, all of this is just taken as true within the central narrative, despite it not actually being true within the central narrative. Or maybe I should clarify that and say more accurately, we have no reason to believe that this is necessarily true within the central narrative. This is not something that is proven or accepted. This is a media story that we are just meant to believe. Skipping down. Voice of America is one of the few fact-based news sources reaching China. In moments of crisis, such as the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, millions of Chinese have relied on VOA for the truthful accounts they can't find in their own country's media. VOA also works to counter the incessant disinformation war that China is waging against the U.S. No wonder state-run Chinese media celebrated the announcement that VOA's journalists would no longer be permitted to do their jobs. And the implication here, of course, is that our media outlets are not actually state media. They are all independent media that just so happens to be owned by 6 major corporations that all just so happen to be partners with the World Economic Forum and global governance bodies, and probably all owned by the same investment portfolios that own everything else: BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, the rest of it. So we are supposed to believe that those media organizations are actually just independent companies within our capitalist system. All of that is nonsense. And we know that our government, in league with foreign governments, is working to censor us anytime the things we are saying conflict with the things that those supposedly independent capitalist companies and corporations are telling us. They also have the BBC's Trusted News Initiative that a lot of these media organizations and the big tech organizations are interfacing with. And the BBC is actually the state media of the United Kingdom. So it's very, very hard to make the case that our media is not state media. And he is directly supporting, explicitly supporting, our state media abroad that happens to agree with the media in the United States that we are told is independent corporate media, independent and corporate media, because even most of our independent media is also corporate media, and very little of it is actually independent. We are supposed to see the media coming out of other countries that conflicts with our state media and the global regime state media, which is the first tool in the toolbox for how to control and overthrow countries. That's all the dangerous state media. And if we get anything that they're saying, that's their propaganda effort in our country. There's only meant to be that one narrative. It is misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation to conflict with that narrative, because then it falls under the umbrella of misleading information, which means the information, if we believe it, doesn't lead us where they need us led. Therefore, we must have been misled. Therefore, the information was misleading, and therefore it's dangerous foreign propaganda, Chinese propaganda, Russian propaganda, or just, homegrown conspiracy theories. Let us continue with this op-ed. VOA has made mistakes, as has every media organization, and reasonable reforms are long overdue. A scalpel rather than hatchet strategy could trim the U.S. Agency for Global Media's bureaucracy, eliminate the overlap between VOA and the regional broadcasters such as Radio Free Europe, and improve editorial oversight. An effective media campaign helped Mr. Trump return to office. He should understand the power of persuasion to shape public opinion that promotes his goals. But when it comes to international affairs, he seems to have a blind spot. Mr. Trump apparently believes in using a combination of carrots and sticks to change the policies of other countries' leaders, but not in using targeted information to shape public attitudes overseas. Public opinion matters, which is why autocrats work so hard to manipulate it. If their citizens have no access to alternative views, autocrats are more likely to succeed with less effort and cost. The U.S. shouldn't play into their hands. We should mend, not end, the voice of America. And that is what they are saying about all this stuff at this point. Oh, you know what? We can agree with you that what they're doing right now might be bad if you look at it in a certain lens, but we can't end these organizations. We need to mend them so that they remain around after Trump is gone, and then they can unmend them and have them continue marching right along, serving these exact purposes. Isn't it amazing that they always admit that the organizations may have gone astray? How come they were never making the case that these organizations had gone astray and must be mended under the fake and illegitimate Biden administration? Why do they believe that it is acceptable for the United States to be propagandizing the populations of other countries so that they will want their countries to submit to the global order? But it's bad when other countries are, quote unquote, propagandizing us to convince us to disavow that foreign order, that global order, and foreign order, I guess. So really all he's saying is that whatever supports the global regime agenda should be promoted, even if other countries might perceive it as an act of psychological warfare against their own populations, which it is. That is not Donald Trump's foreign policy. Donald Trump's foreign policy is America first, which means that China can be China first, Russia can be Russia first. Every country can take care of themselves primarily, rather than catering to the interests of the global regime. That's the foreign policy. We shouldn't be propagandizing other countries. We shouldn't be waging psychological warfare campaigns on other countries. If we were actually setting a good example in the world, we probably wouldn't have to. And if other countries were actually treating their own populations as badly as these people claim they are, perhaps then the people would rise up against that on their own, rather than being conditioned to do that by what we admit to be global regime propaganda, the sort that is thrust upon the American people and met with censorship when the American people disavow it or dissent from it. Utterly dystopian. And we are all just supposed to accept that and approve of that. Really is incredible. Let us continue forward. This is from Morning Joe and Morning Mika yesterday discussing this very op-ed.
National security in the middle of a war on terror than telling the NSA you can't continue that program. One judge did that. It got appealed. And guess what? He got to continue the program. The same thing happened with Barack Obama. A judge out of Texas on an immigration issue. One federal judge out of Texas stops the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans program. One federal judge out of Texas stopped a Title IX program about gender identity in the Obama administration. One federal judge out of Texas stopped Joe Biden's vaccine mandates for federal contractors. It happens. One federal judge stops president's programs, and it is shocking to me. I will say it is shocking to me. They know this. And you actually have people coming out every day saying things they know are wrong. And I didn't hear them complaining.
Well, in that case, it was the attorney general talking to a judge, just FYI.
And they know this is what happened. Now, listen, if we want to have a debate and you want to go to Congress and say maybe one federal judge shouldn't be able to do this, have the debate and go ahead and have a judicial reform package. Because I know a lot of people think one federal judge shouldn't be able to do that. But that is how our system works, and it is how it has worked for decades.
And that's why it was so significant when Chief Justice John Roberts came out earlier this week and threw a baseball metaphor, a brushback pitch, right, saying, okay, boys, hold off. You know, you're stepping into our territory now. And I think it was a significant development that Roberts was the one.
So Mike Barnacle is still with us and joining the conversation.
All right. Now, I am not 100% sure that was the, it's one of those days, guys. It's one of those days. That was obviously more related to the judges than it was to the speech issues and that particular op-ed from the Wall Street Journal. They were essentially backing up the same point as that op-ed journalist. They are upset that people are allowed to say the things that they are saying because they are convinced that the things being said are wrong. And apparently that is now the new standard of whether or not people are allowed to speak. Let us move now toward the British Commonwealth. And this is a little flashback from 3 or 4 weeks ago.
You'd like to say what that very important paragraph?
Yes, so this is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented. And I think that just symbolises the strength of the relationship between us. So this is a very special letter. I think the last state visit was a tremendous success. His Majesty the King wants to make this even better than that. So this is truly historic, an unprecedented second state visit. He wants to talk that through with you.
And that says at Windsor. That's
Yes.
really something.
Yes. What I haven't got yet is your answer. I do need to.
The answer is yes. On behalf of our wonderful First Lady, Melania, and myself, the answer is yes, and we look forward to being there and honoring the King and honoring really your country. Your country is a fantastic country, and it'll be our honor to be there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. I shall happily take that back to His Majesty.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was from Sir Keir Starmer's visit to the Oval Office from late February, and he brought with him an invite for Donald Trump to receive an unprecedented second state visit to the United Kingdom. This is from Town and Country, just a quick review, a brief history of Donald Trump's controversial interactions with the royal family. Trump courting Princess Diana, they say, back in 1992. Trump defending paparazzi who took intrusive photos of Kate. What a controversy that was. Meghan Markle being upset about Donald Trump. Charles speaking out. Melania meeting with Prince Harry. Trump failing to attend the royal wedding between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And then, of course, the meeting with the Queen. And here we have the original state visit. And this is very interesting because you look at Melania's outfit right here, and I would imagine that many of you already know where I'm going with this. But Melania looks like she has essentially the reverse of her outfit from Inauguration Day this year. And let me just quickly pull that up. Hold for processing. We are almost there. What in the world? It is coming, I promise. Goodness gracious. There we are. So that jacket hat combo seems to me to be a black and white. It's not exact, but fairly strong resemblance, black and white reversal of the outfit there. Trump meeting with the Queen, attending tea once again at Clarence House, calling the Queen a beautiful lady. King Charles wrote to Trump privately following the assassination attempt. And Melania has said that she and Charles are pen pals. So what an interesting relationship they have. Now, I'm bringing all of this up for a reason. Let's continue to look at, we've discussed over the last few weeks a number of times that there have been these signals, these optics that would suggest perhaps the British Commonwealth is not what it once was. This was Donald Trump walking in front of the Queen. He also went and greeted some of these soldiers that are supposed to be very still, very silent. He did not follow protocols. He did not exercise proper decorum. And the British monarchs are all about decorum. That is something we have always been told, always been shown. This was a few weeks ago. Windsor Castle opens St. George's Hall to Muslims observing Ramadan. And I have indicated and suggested numerous times now that it seems like the British Commonwealth is collapsing. I mean, this is the British Empire kind of scaled back to the Commonwealth in the first half of the 20th century because it was no longer having colonies all around the world was not what it once was. People didn't like the idea, began not to like the idea of colonization. So they kind of just switched the way they would refer to these things. They weren't colonies anymore. They were just Commonwealth states. They were independent. They were republics. They had their own leaders. And so there were, I believe, 54 of those. Then just a few weeks ago, we had Charles meeting with the comedic actor from Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. He wore a sweatsuit to meet the king. However much Donald Trump would have acted in a disgraceful manner, violating the standards of decorum, Volodymyr Zelensky did it in spades. Let me find, there's one more that I really, oh, here it is. Perfect. And then we have, I believe we talked about this last week, celebrating Canada Day with Prince Charles's, let me make that even bigger. Absolutely disgusting. Oh man, that's not big enough. Whatever's happening with his mouth is just gross. So the king and the British Commonwealth and British royalty, the monarchy in general, has looked rather ridiculous, or been made to look rather ridiculous over the past few weeks. And yes, these are primarily optics related concerns, but optics are a big thing. And this was from the beginning of the week. King meets Carney in symbolic support for Canada. This is from the United Kingdom state media, the BBC. King Charles gave a warm welcome to the new Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, when he visited Buckingham Palace. It was another symbolic gesture of support for Canada from a king wearing a red tie who has to send coded signals rather than spell out things in words as Canada faces threats from US President Donald Trump. So the BBC is telling us that the British monarch is sending coded signals out in his dress and presentation over concerns about Donald Trump, as if Donald Trump can't read through those signals. It's all so strange. As far as I'm concerned, this stuff is as strange as it gets. But the king has sought to make clear his commitment to Canada. And if it had not been for his cancer diagnosis, the BBC understands he would have traveled there for an intended visit in 2024. There are also suggestions that once Canada's election is out of the way, a visit to Canada will be a priority where he can further demonstrate his support. So again, optics. He was sick. Sorry, he couldn't make it. And once your election thing is settled, well, then we'll come and then we will show our support, because it has to be done in an optical manner. We can't just simply figure out another way to support Canada. We need to go for the visit and show it for real. The new Canadian Prime Minister told the king that his Order of Canada pin had broken this morning. The king joked, "Do you want mine?" So we're supposed to be totally concerned with the optics. It's telling us, hey, all of this is symbolism, and the symbols that they're attempting to project are collapsing as they're projecting them. The king congratulated Carney on becoming the new prime minister, ushering him to a seat, and perhaps hoping that the broken pin was not a symbol of a Commonwealth relationship under strain. And as we've discussed many times, the British monarch actually has to approve of, they have to give their approval to the prime minister in the Commonwealth nations, as Queen Elizabeth did only 2 days before we were told that she died. And I love going back to this, and it's important for anyone who hasn't seen it before. This is Queen Elizabeth just 2 days before her death, giving her approval to Liz Truss. Where are we? Give me Hello Magazine. This is the one I always use. It's just so perfect in its presentation. Merely 2 days before it was announced to the world that the Queen had died at some point, probably not just the day that we were told, but there she is, meeting Liz Truss. The Queen is shrinking. It's possible that the shrinking just increased in pace until 2 days later, when she simply blipped out of existence due to her smallness. Could be that she's just floating around somewhere still with us. These things are rather important, said the king, ahead of a 30-minute conversation with no one else in attendance. Carney later went on to meet UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer at Downing Street. Sir Keir hailed, or Sir Kerr, I think is how they say it, hailed the relationship between the two countries and said they had so much in common. Shared history, shared values, shared king. Carney said he was grateful for the welcomes and the constructive discussions with Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron, whom he had met earlier in the day. At a news conference, he was asked if he felt let down by the lack of support for Canada from other allies, given Trump's trade war with Canada and his remarks about making Canada the 51st state of the U.S. We don't need another country to validate our sovereignty. We are sovereign. We don't need praise from another country. We are proud in and of ourselves, he said, adding that Sir Kerr had made a point of referring to Canada's sovereignty and to, quote, our shared sovereign in King Charles III. So they are a member of the Commonwealth and are not technically sovereign, but they're going to pretend they're sovereign, but they also have a sovereign that exists above them. The meeting with Carney is the latest scene in an intricate diplomatic balancing act for a king who is head of state of both the UK and Canada. Okay, so the king is the head of state in Canada. Therefore, they're not sovereign. They are literally controlled by another head of state. They are a member of the Commonwealth. King Charles has to show solidarity with Canada without disrupting the UK's relationship with Trump. Why? He's the king. The king also has to avoid getting directly involved in politics and has to speak on advice of ministers. Whatever he might personally believe about Trump's comments about taking over Canada, the king has to keep his thoughts to himself. Why? He's king, and that's part of his Commonwealth. Adding to this complicated choreography is that the royals are one of the strongest cards the UK can play with President Trump. He seemed delighted by his second state visit invitation from the king. You saw the video. Did he seem delighted? He said the words, "Oh, yes. Oh, what an honor. I am so honored. And yes, of course, I will attend." Did he seem delighted? So messages from the king are sent in symbolic displays. In case anyone missed the signs over Canada, there have been multiple moments and then some more. When the king visited aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales, he appeared wearing a set of Canadian medals. And oh, doesn't he look so regal and so military? The 60th anniversary of Canada's maple leaf flag might usually have passed without any royal intervention, but there was a fulsome message sent by the king praising the proud, resilient, and compassionate country. A ceremonial sword for Canada became an event at Buckingham Palace with a formal presentation by the king. At a tree planting ceremony in Buckingham Palace, the tree chosen was a maple. And when the king sat down at the Commonwealth service last week, it was on a Canadian chair. If any of these moments were accidental, they were not being rejected by Buckingham Palace, with royal sources emphasizing the king's commitment to Canada. Oh, how wonderful. But there is no avoiding the tensions and contradictions in this balancing act. Emails from Canadians to the BBC's Royal Watch newsletter show that many want a much more robust defense from the king. What a cop-out. Throw Canada to the wolves. Give us pats for our flag's anniversary. Giving us, geez, I can't even read now. So now it's me just having technical errors. Call tech support on my own brain and body. Here sits a monarchist who is seriously rethinking his allegiance to the crown. Emailed Brian, a Canadian military veteran, Carol in Vancouver was unhappy at the invitation from the UK for a second state visit by President Trump. I feel ashamed for the Brits, feeling they have to follow through with inviting such a boor for dinner. For the life of me, I do not understand why he has this power over you, she wrote. As a Canadian, the invitation is a slap in the face to the people of Canada. If the king is our king, as we are a Commonwealth country, and Trump is basically at war with us, how dare King Charles give him any credence? Emailed Patricia. As a Canadian, I am saddened, appalled, disgusted, and angry that King Charles appears to be joining the conga line of supplicants, said Joanne in Ontario. But King Charles will have to keep to the line set by ministers. And if that means maintaining good relations with Trump, he is unlikely to be saying anything more outspoken. Ah, yes, the king, the monarch, has to do as he is told by the ministers in the UK's government. So British state media, global state media, is communicating to us that everything is symbols and optics, and then includes in their article derogatory comments about Donald Trump coming from random Canadians who said things online or in emails, and they listed all of the ways in which the British monarchy has been showing its support to Canada without actually being able to say that it supports Canada. Let us continue. This is from today, actually in the evening yesterday, I suppose, from The Sun, the U.S. edition. King Charles to make secret offer to Donald Trump during state visit after Starmer hand-delivered letter from King. The royal proposal is said to potentially reduce tensions between the White House and Canada. And there again is Charles looking like a wax figurine. Really atrocious smile. The mouth looks horrific. The hand again, who knows what's going on there? Plans are allegedly in the works to make the USA the next associate member of the Commonwealth. The International Association, which currently boasts 56 states, apologies, I said 54 earlier, could welcome the U.S. as a new member. In February, a tariff war began between the U.S. and Canada, with Trump signing orders to impose near universal tariffs on goods from Canada entering the U.S. The U.S. president revealed Canada could avoid higher taxes if it joined the United States of America as its 51st state. Canada, of which the king is head of state, is part of the Commonwealth of Nations, and including America may dampen the current conflict. So you get it? We are going to submit to becoming part of the British Commonwealth, and that might make our relations with Canada go easier. Suggestions for the U.S. to join the Commonwealth were first made during Trump's first stint in the White House by the Royal Commonwealth Society with the blessing of Queen Elizabeth. Now, in his second term, the proposal has been brought back, with members of the society crossing their fingers for the king to extend an invitation to Trump upon their next meeting. It would be a wonderful move that would symbolize Britain's close relationship with the United States. Donald Trump loves Britain and has great respect for the royal family, so we believe he would see the benefit of this. When the RCS first wrote to Trump in 2017, the letter was delivered by current Reform leader Nigel Farage. The latest letter was hand-delivered to the U.S. last month by Sir Keir Starmer, inviting the U.S. leader to a second state visit. A delighted President Trump immediately accepted the invitation, hailing both Starmer and the king as special and beautiful. He declared it would be an honor to visit the king's fantastic country. And it goes on. So the suggestion now is that the United States is going to become part of the Commonwealth. And this suggestion, of course, is being made. The portrayal of this is being done in British outlets, the BBC and the Sun. And this might be the US publication of the Sun, but it's still the Sun. We have seen, they tell us that optics are everything. We've seen over the past few weeks, the optics are that the British Commonwealth is being publicly shamed, humiliated, and embarrassed in global mass media. Now we are supposed to believe that Donald Trump is going to be honored to join the British Commonwealth. We can speculate about how this is going to go, about how this story, and it is a story, will wind up. I would guess that there will be this flirtation about joining the Commonwealth. I would hope that we will decide not to do that, and that the problems will be resolved in another way. Why would we want to sign up for another multilateral global organization? Why would any of the American people want to be a part of the British Commonwealth, even an associate member? It seems like they are trying to suggest, trying to reaffirm the quote unquote special relationship that we have always been told we have with the United Kingdom. What is that special relationship? Is it that we just remained a colony, or that we were sold back in pieces over time, that the British Crown, the global bankers, have controlled our country? Is that what the special relationship is? What was the War of 1812? What was the Civil War? What were all of these historical events that we've been told reaffirmed our independence, our sovereignty? You really have to wonder. They tell us it's all optics. What is it really? All right. I hope you guys are doing okay over on YouTube. It is so disconcerting not to have access to the Rumble stream to know what is going on over there. If anything, I assume it's nothing, but usually I'm able to interact and people will come up with funny Rumble rants and add to the show. Now I'm just here on an island. It's just me here with I'm just kidding. Una Panuna Banca is not here. She is not on the island I am currently stranded on. She might be on Gilligan's Island in outer space. Okay. This whole British monarchy thing is very, very strange, if you ask me. Now, I mentioned this maybe this morning on Badlands Daily. Donald Trump has been referring consistently to April 2nd as Liberation Day. And I can't help but keep noticing this now. I'm kind of attuned to it at this point. This was from Wednesday evening. The Fed would be much better off cutting rates as U.S. tariffs start to transition, ease, in parentheses, their way into the economy. Do the right thing. April 2nd is Liberation Day in America. April 2nd is the date that Donald Trump has numerous times now noted as Liberation Day, and said the significance of this day is when the reciprocal tariffs are going into effect. And Howard Lutnick, he's done it numerous times now in the Oval Office. Howard Lutnick is always over his shoulder, kind of chuckling about all of this. Trump says he didn't want to do it on April 1st because that's April Fool's Day. He didn't want anybody to be confused. So he decided he was going to start all this stuff On April 2nd, over the past few years, he has talked about the perception from world leaders like Xi Jinping that Donald Trump must be playing a trick on them with Joe Biden in there as president. It's just April Fool's Day. Every day is April Fool's Day over and over again. Trump has said that a number of times over the last few years. Let me see if I can actually find it. I'm not sure if it'll be possible to find this quickly, but let me see. Maybe I am able to find this quickly. Someone. Pardon for hold for processing. I'm trying to find. Oh man. I'm going to give up on my search for the April Fool's Day quotes. But he said this a number of times now, and he continues to say it. And this is another one just from this week. This is this morning. April 2nd is Liberation Day for America. For decades, we have been ripped off and abused by every nation in the world, both friend and foe. Now it is finally time for the good old USA to get some of that money and respect back. God bless America. Now, Donald Trump has also put up in his office the Declaration of Independence and showed it off the other night to Laura Ingraham as he gave her a tour of the White House. Let me see if I can figure out a way to speed through this video so we don't have to go through all of it.
Here's a question I ask. So Reagan has a place of prominence, and George Washington has a place of prominence. And I've asked this question maybe 200 times. People come in. I said, so who would you put in the place of prominence, George Washington or Ronald Reagan? Who would you put?
Washington.
So far, it's 219-0. And they like Reagan.
Oh, I love Reagan.
But here's what they like more than anything. So this is the Declaration of Independence.
Wow, there we go.
And they ask that this be done. It's never been up. It's been in the vaults for many, many decades. And they said, we have to do something like drapes or something because the light eventually affects it. And it's very cool.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that great? Just went up yesterday.
Wow.
Think Joe Biden would do this? I don't think so. Do you think he'd think of it? Do you think he knows what it is?
Wow.
No, but look at it. So, but this was, none of these pictures were up. Oh, you know, very few. It's like very little.
What do you think Donald Trump's communicating there? He just hung the Declaration of Independence in the Oval Office while all this stuff is going on with the British Commonwealth. He's telling us April 2nd is Liberation Day. And I gotta say, I mean, I can draw my own conclusions. I think these things are meaningful. You might not think they're meaningful. Sometimes people get upset with this sort of thing. What are you talking about? That doesn't mean anything. Hey, the symbols are important. The optics are driving this thing. As Elon Musk says, the most entertaining outcome is the likeliest. It's following a narrative arc. What is the narrative? The narrative is America reclaiming its independence. We are scrolling back. We are unwinding all the way to the Declaration of Independence, perhaps farther. I've said this for a long time. Donald Trump, a couple of years ago, talked about America's 250th birthday party. When did he say that begins? Well, he said it begins in May of this year. He may have said Memorial Day, but I know he said May of this year. And it's going to extend until Independence Day of 2026, the 4th of July. So what happened in 1775? Well, the Continental Army was formed. So those were the first steps toward independence. We're now hitting that 250th anniversary. And it seems like he's marking, he says May, maybe it's his birthday, Flag Day in June, which is that date. Maybe he's marking that date. We'll see when exactly it happens. But he's saying this is Liberation Day. This is Reciprocal Tariffs Day. What does it mean that reciprocal tariffs are being put on? What does it mean that tariffs are being put on? Well, that means that the top-down global economic order has collapsed, okay? Because the fact that there aren't tariffs there is an indication of top-down control over economies. Otherwise, there would be tariffs there. We would be able to tariff other countries, but we don't tariff other countries. They tariff our goods so that we can subsidize the existence of those countries and keep them in that top-down controlled global economy, that economic system. We are now seeing the declaration of independence from that, from global regime control, while the regime continues to suggest that we are going to be brought back into their system. We're going to become part of the British Commonwealth. We're going to be an associate nation of the British Commonwealth. Why would anyone want that? And just one more connection that I find interesting with this date. Donald Trump has now many, many times said that this here is the chart that saved his life. This was the famous chart that he turned his head to look at in assassination event number 1. Itself, quite a narrative event. What is the date? Pointed to that says, and I don't know if this will actually expand for me or not. Let me see if I can. No, that's not going to work, I don't think. Oh, there we are. Trump leaves office. Lowest illegal immigration in recorded history. Okay. The date there sure looks to be the beginning of April in 2020. So we're about to hit the 5-year point from that date on April 1st. But he doesn't want to do it on April Fool's Day. So it's going to happen on April 2nd. He says it's Liberation Day. The question then becomes, liberation from what? And what is the significance of this date? What is the significance of the Declaration of Independence being put on the wall while we're hearing that Charles is going to make a secret offer for Trump to be part of the Commonwealth? If Trump brings the U.S. in to become part of the Commonwealth, I would suggest that perhaps it's because the Commonwealth is ours. It'll be like, hold on. Oh gosh, it's so funny. It will be like Donald Trump. Whatever. I'm not going to find a good one. This will just have to suffice. The first one that came up. It'll be I'm the captain now, except just I'm the king now. And again, I've been saying since, I think that was in November, when Donald Trump went to the reopening of the Cathedral of Notre Dame. He's been shown as the king of the world. I think that we're going to see even more of that. And at that point, there won't be much question about Canada, will there? But what do I know? I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy theorist who pays attention to optics and stories and what those optics and stories mean rather than the minute details of the fake news. And I'm the one doing it wrong. Let's get to some more international stuff, and we'll get back into tech a little bit, and hopefully we will get back into some domestic stuff, and then we can bring it on home for a week of technical errors. So this is The Guardian. Nvidia will spend hundreds of billions of dollars on U.S. manufacturing, says CEO. The boss of the world's biggest computer chip maker, Nvidia, has promised that the company will shell out several $100 billion to make semiconductors and other electronics in the U.S. over the next 4 years. The comments from Jensen Huang illustrate how the California headquartered AI chip maker is remodeling its supply chain away from Asia amid unpredictable tariff threats from Donald Trump. Also because we've had an ongoing decoupling process since Donald Trump's first term. And now we are beginning to see the cumulative effect and the kind of climax and resolution of the story process along a number of these narrative lines. Decoupling from China, the tech moving back home, and also being privatized, a la Twitter, seized and redeployed potentially. We're about to reach the end of the TikTok 75-day extension over the ban that Donald Trump put in place his first day in office. When do 75 days from January 20th expire? Well, it's in that first week of April. Are we going to get the TikTok answer? TikTok seems like, well, it's already been brought under Oracle. We've been getting all these signals that Oracle will end up taking control of TikTok. Obviously, all that has been that way for 5 years now. It was set up then. It's coming to fruition now. Public disclosure, the conclusion, the resolution of these storylines, it's all hitting this same point in time. Is that just random? Are these stories going to be resolved at that point as planned in 2020 as the result of a course of a series of normal events playing out over these last 4 years or 5 years? I would suggest the likelihood of that all happening by some random coincidence where Donald Trump was not president and the fake and illegitimate president, Joe Biden, was president, doing everything he could to thwart Trump over these last few years. That's impossible. What I'm saying, not impossible. It is the obvious interpretation, having observed these things closely for that entire time, while the mainstream media and the mainstream influencers and people, let's say in other parts of the truth community, who spend their time not actually observing narratives and stories, but trying to find little hints and signals all over the place and then just rehashing those. Here it is. You can see these things happening. We have followed them the whole time. My partners in Badlands have followed these things the whole time. And now it's coming to fruition. The chief executive, who also co-founded Nvidia, told the Financial Times, overall, we will procure over the course of the next 4 years, probably $500 billion worth of electronics in total. And I think we can easily see ourselves manufacturing several hundred billion of it here in the United States. The remarks are the latest example of how Trump's America First policy is having an impact on business investment, even forcing groups such as Nvidia, which is among the world's most valuable companies, to rethink their global footprint. This part is extremely interesting and why it's worth bringing this up today. Aside from the power of the America First agenda, Donald Trump's tariffs, etc., the tariffs provide a narrative cover for what's happening, but this is just part of the decoupling, the manufacturing decoupling from China, and it gets more specific. the Silicon Valley company, founded in 1993, has been an engine of the AI market boom, with hype around the technology propelling its valuation to a stratospheric $2.9 trillion. Trillion. But in recent years, it and other big US tech companies such as Apple have become increasingly dependent on chip-making facilities in Taiwan run by TSMC and Foxconn, a supply chain now under threat from trade wars and from China's territorial designs on its neighbor, that being Taiwan. Taiwan is a proxy state of the global regime. How could it be? So, is the reason for the decoupling just our adversarial relationship with China, or is the decoupling from the global regime while China is decoupling from the global regime, as we have theorized, speculated, evidenced over the last 3 or 4 years? I think I've been talking about this relative to China, Taiwan, well over 3 years, because that's just the Ukraine war era. And I've said, obviously, the Ukraine war and the Ukraine and Russia is parallel to China and Taiwan. I feel like very few things could be more obvious than that. Huang said he was confident that Nvidia was well positioned to deal with any worsening situation in Taiwan, which is also vulnerable to earthquakes. Oh, got it. So you're not getting the war you've speculated about and kind of saber-rattled over for the last few years. We're going to get an earthquake instead. Very interesting. At this point, we know that we can manufacture here in the US. We have a sufficiently diversified supply chain. So all of a sudden, the whole semiconductor rationalization for why the neocons said we would have to go to war in China is simply evaporating. Well, who are the people who've been saying we're not going to go to war with these other countries? And in fact, we're not at war with them now. That would be me, you, the broader Badlands community, some of the truth community, though not very much. And that's really it. That's everybody. What's actually happening in the real world? And the strange thing is, I know that you guys are tracking all this stuff because you continue to watch and listen to my show and continue to understand the things I'm saying. Is it impossible for all of the mass media organizations to have tracked these things in a realistic and honest way? We continue to be told that everything is being done to wake up the normies, as though there's no other way they would have woken up. The people who watch Fox News, even and no offense to boomers, okay? This is not about offending boomers. It's just once you reach a certain age, you probably have a lot less tolerance than the people in the truth community who are boomers, who've been awake for decades. You are obviously accepted from this, okay? So do not consider this commentary on you at all. I know that you are not like this. But for normal boomers who have worked their whole lives and are now retired and are trying to keep up with current events or whatever, are going to believe what they read on Facebook, believe what they see on Fox News, or they're watching CNN or MSNBC or whatever. Okay? People eventually lose their ambition and motivation to go digging on these things. They want the easier version. They have other priorities in their life. And so they're going to get the easy version and accept the easy version. We are supposed to believe that if they were being told all of the things that people in the truth community say, people like myself say, they wouldn't be able to believe those things if they were told, if they were communicated to them by people like Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson, Dan Bongino or Ben Shapiro, the people in the mainstream. Somehow the normies wouldn't wake up if they were told these same things because they're not ready for these things. Well, first of all, I have never believed that it is anybody's right or position to justify the case that other people, not them, but other people, need to be lied to in order to figure out the truth. I don't think that's true. I don't think people need to be lied to. But the other case beyond that is that if they were told the truth, they wouldn't be able to accept it. They would reject it, and then they would go somewhere else, even though they are already in the only somewhere else people go. They go to the mainstream. You're telling me that if Fox News just said 24 hours a day, it is quite clear that Joe Biden never received 81 million real lawful American votes, they wouldn't have believed it? That part's never made sense to me. Now, maybe we had to see all these things in the order in which we've seen them, and all good. It's just fine. The reality is what it is. But in terms of explanations for what has happened the last 5 years, do you have a better grip on what has happened and how to respond to it from taking in all the conspiracy theories, or from watching Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and Dan Bongino and Ben Shapiro and all the rest of them? Are they looking out for themselves? Do they know how to handle what comes next? Or are they just being fed rage bait all day long and being kept within that central narrative bubble, never to escape? They still haven't escaped. Maybe Liberation Day. So it sounds like China-Taiwan is not going to happen. Okay? Because there would be no justification for it. And we don't need to go to war to preserve our manufacturing capabilities when it comes to next generation semiconductors. Nvidia is bringing it back onshore. We have all these foreign investments coming back onshore to build high-tech manufacturing in the United States of America. Okay? And so Nvidia announced that yesterday. What else did we get yesterday? Well, this is the New York Times. Pentagon set up briefing for Musk on potential war with China. What? Potential war with China? On the same day that we find out the semiconductors can be made here? How does it happen? The Pentagon was scheduled on Friday to brief Elon Musk on the U.S. military's plan for any war that might break out with China, 2 U.S. officials said on Thursday. Another official said the briefing would be China-focused without providing additional details. A fourth official confirmed Mr. Musk was to be at the Pentagon on Friday, but offered no details. Hours after news of the planned meeting was published by the New York Times, Pentagon officials and President Trump denied that the session would be about military plans involving China. China will not be mentioned or discussed, Mr. Trump said in a late-night social media post. It was not clear if the briefing for Mr. Musk would go ahead as originally planned. It wasn't clear. Were they attempting to halt the meeting so that Elon Musk couldn't attend the meeting? But providing Mr. Musk access to some of the nation's most closely guarded military secrets would be a dramatic expansion of his already extensive role as an advisor to Mr. Trump and leader of his effort to slash spending and purge the government of people and policies they oppose. Would it really? How would that be a dramatic expansion? He is already the leading recipient of Defense Department contracts. All his companies are Defense Department linked companies, including X, formerly Twitter. He has the highest of high-level security clearance. At least that's what we've been told. So how would him being included in a Pentagon meeting be a dramatic expansion? It's like the people at the Pentagon, these U.S. officials, don't want Elon Musk at the meeting and are trying to thwart the intent of the meeting. Are they concerned about being monitored? It really is incredible. The top secret briefing that exists for the China war plan has about 20 to 30 slides that lay out how the U.S. would fight such a conflict. It covers the plan beginning with the indications and warning of a threat from China to various options on what Chinese targets to hit, over what time period, that we would be presented to Mr. Trump for decisions according to officials with knowledge of the plan. It sounds an awful lot like those officials are attempting to drum up a war with China in the mold of the neocon warmongering we've seen now for our entire lives, and that effort is being thwarted. The chief Pentagon spokesman, Sean Parnell, initially did not respond to an email seeking comment about why Mr. Musk was to receive a briefing on the China war plan. Soon after the Times published this article on Thursday evening, Mr. Parnell gave a short statement. The Defense Department is excited to welcome Elon Musk to the Pentagon on Friday. He was invited by Secretary Hegseth and is just visiting. Well, that's simple enough, isn't it? What drama? What absolute drama? Why are we being fed all this drama over a meeting that Elon Musk was simply invited to? Axios updated their reporting. Actually, let's go to Trump's post first. Maybe we can even skip Axios. They're basically just saying the same sorts of things, but they have a little update on the meeting where you get the most mundane comments you could ever imagine. So this is last night. The fake news is at it again. This time, the failing New York Times, they said incorrectly that Elon Musk is going to the Pentagon tomorrow to be briefed on any potential war with China. How ridiculous. China will not even be mentioned or discussed. How disgraceful it is that the discredited media can make up such lies. Anyway, the story is completely untrue. Why didn't the New York Times include all of those comments in the comments from Axios, by the way? I'll just share this quickly. Always a great meeting, Musk said as he left. I've been here before, you know. That's hysterical and good for Elon. I mean, these are the sorts of things that give me confidence in what Elon Musk is doing. It does not provide me any confidence in what the Pentagon is doing. And I guess it's semi-questionable about how I would interpret the Pentagon role in this. I mean, Hegseth is the leader of the Pentagon who is leaking about these things. And who knows if this even counts as a leak, right? Maybe it's intentional messaging to throw the media off. But it's really interesting that there was supposed to be a Pentagon briefing on how they were going to present Donald Trump options on going to war with China on the same day that Nvidia announces it's bringing semiconductors back to America. Hundreds of billions of dollars. This is Trump's other post on Truth Social regarding this New York Times article. Elon Musk will be briefed by the Pentagon about the USA's top secret plans against China should there be a war. And that was a quote. According to the failing New York Times, one of the worst and most purposefully inaccurate newspapers anywhere in the world. Purposely inaccurate. Interesting phrase. Anywhere in the world. Well, it's all global regime state media, propaganda media. Their fake concept for this story is that because Elon does some business in China, that he is very conflicted and would immediately go to top Chinese officials and, quote unquote, spill the beans. And that would then lead anyone who believes this story to form the belief that Elon Musk is operating in an anti-American fashion. He should not be allowed to go to these meetings because he's going to take that information and give it over to his Chinese partners. It's pretty incredible. Ratings challenged fake news CNN immediately picked up on this absolutely ridiculous and false story, which is probably libelous. Interesting. And went heavy with it. Fortunately, nobody was watching. Maggot Haberman, the real dumb, quote unquote, scammer who constantly writes about me for the Times using anonymous and made up, parentheses, non-existent sources, and who I haven't spoken to in ages, is a big part of the scam. And she is a big part of all these scams, to the point where you have to wonder if Donald Trump had just hired her to plant false stories. He calls her a quote unquote scammer and talks about non-existent sources. Well, if the sources are non-existent, then the sources didn't give this information, and then it is just fake news from the beginning. So is this just, is he using these terms figuratively, or is he being specific and literal that these sources don't exist and that she's just making up these stories? She led the Russia hoax, only to realize that she was duped and got it wrong. She owes me a totally discredited Pulitzer Prize for her bad reporting. The fake news is the enemy of the people, and Elon is not being briefed on anything China by the Department of War. The Department of War. Well, that's what they were called at the founding. Now they're called the Department of Defense, which is itself dystopian. The Department of War. Very interesting. So Elon Musk is not being briefed about China. We are not on the verge of war with China. The justification for the war with China has disappeared because the semiconductors are being re-onshored. And so the one thing that was being manufactured in Taiwan that we could not afford to lose, because semiconductors are just in all of our technology, even like our smart ovens, simple technology to the most complex AI data centers and processors in the world. We need these semiconductors. If China takes over Taiwan, we're going to be cut off from those semiconductors. Then we're screwed. Therefore, it justifies a war. Now we need to go to war because we don't want China kicking the global regime out of Taiwan the same way Russia's kicking the global regime out of Ukraine. And of course, we, as America First, in the mindset of America First, understanding that other countries can take care of their own interests first, we have no problem whatsoever with the global regime getting kicked out of its proxy states. In fact, I want the global regime kicked out of its proxy states so that the citizens of those countries, the people of those countries, I should say more accurately, can control their own destinies. And I want our propaganda, the global regime's state propaganda, removed from those countries so that the people of those countries can control their own destinies. This is Walter Bloomberg on X, formerly Twitter, reporting on Elon Musk's visit. Elon Musk visited the Pentagon Friday for talks on China and other topics. Originally set for a top secret China war briefing, he instead received an unclassified update. His presence raised conflict of interest concerns, given Tesla's ties to China and SpaceX's defense contracts. Defense officials, including Admiral Paparo, discussed U.S. advantages in space, cyber, and submarines. Pentagon leaders clarified the meeting was about innovation, not classified war plans. Musk, holding security clearance and advising Trump, has shown interest in defense, recently criticizing F-35 jets in favor of drones and meeting with the NSA. His pro-China comments and contact with Putin have drawn further scrutiny. So Walter Bloomberg there is picking up first and foremost on the central narrative, the official story within the central narrative, believing the New York Times story in that reporting that there was supposed to be a top secret briefing. Then Elon Musk went, so now it can't be the briefing that they intended. It has to be a different briefing. Trump and Elon's side are both suggesting it was never intended to be what they're saying in the first place. But it's possible that Pentagon and Pentagon officials the Pentagon and Pentagon officials may have wanted to put forward the idea that there was that briefing so that Trump would be briefed on all these concerns or these plans on how to go to war with China, so they could then run another narrative about Donald Trump and what he knew based on these classified briefings from the Pentagon about what China was doing. Then they can make the case that Donald Trump is acting in an irresponsible way, and that not only is Elon compromised by China, but Trump is compromised by China. This is how they have run these things for decades upon decades upon decades. Leak out what the briefing is about, suggesting that the person would know all that information and then is acting in opposition to that information, no matter what they do going forward, even though there's no confirmation on what the information is and no reason to believe that the information even exists, other than taking the word of 2 U.S. officials, always unnamed. You can see the operation in motion. And when we can see the operation in motion, we need to understand that we must avoid it. Now, Donald Trump today in the Oval Office announced the production of next generation fighters. And here we go.
But we're here for a reason today that is very exciting, and I'm thrilled to announce that at my direction, the United States Air Force is moving forward with the world's first 6th generation fighter jet. Number 6, 6th generation. Nothing in the world comes even close to it. And it'll be known as the F-47. The generals picked a title, and it's a beautiful number, F-47. It's something the likes of which nobody has seen before in terms of all of the attributes of a fighter jet. There's never been anything even close to it, from speed to maneuverability to what it can have to payload. And this has been in the works for a long period of time. After a rigorous and thorough competition between some of America's top aerospace companies, the Air Force is going to be awarding the contract for the next generation air dominance platform to Boeing. As you know, it was highly competed for. There was a lot of competition, generals, and it's been going on for a long time. Very, very tough competition, but this plane is produced numbers that nobody's ever seen before. The F-47 will be the most advanced, most capable, most lethal aircraft ever built. An experimental version of the plane has secretly been flying for almost 5 years, and we're confident that it massively overpowers the capabilities of any other nation. There's no other nation. We know every other plane. I've seen every one of them, and it's not even close. This is a next level. You know, level 5 is good. This is level 6, they say. The F-47 is equipped with state-of-the-art stealth technology. It's virtually unseeable and unprecedented power. It's got the most power of any jet of its kind ever made. Maneuverability, likewise, is there's never been anything like it, despite the power and speed. Its speed is top. It's over 2, which is something that you don't hear very often. America's enemies will never see it coming. Hopefully we won't have to use it for that purpose, but you have to have it. And if it ever happens, they won't know what the hell hit them. A new fleet of these magnificent planes will be built in the air during my administration over the next couple of years. It's ready to go. They've already built much of what has to be built in terms of production, including the sheds. We'll ensure that the USA continues to dominate the skies. We've given an order for a lot. We can't tell you the price because it would give way to some of the technology and some of the size of the plane, good-sized plane. This contract also represents a historic investment in our defense industrial base, helping to keep America at the cutting edge of aerospace and technology. Our allies are calling constantly. They want to buy them also, and certain allies will be selling them, perhaps toned down versions. We'd like to tone them down about 10%, which probably makes sense because someday maybe they're not our allies, right? But I would like to ask Secretary Hegseth, who's doing a fantastic job. He's really...
Someday they're maybe not our allies. Ezra Cohen remarked about the leak from the New York Times. The lead author of the false NY Times story regarding a briefing for Elon Musk on PRC contingency plans is Eric Schmidt. Based on my experience, he is heavily sourced within the joint staff and often publishes false information on their behalf. The framing of the story and the content of the article also points to the joint staff as the source, perhaps to protect corrupt joint staff interests that are in the reform crosshairs, need to finish joint staff house cleaning and dramatically reduce numbers. He also commented today, and let me see if I can find it just quickly, about the new the new generation of fighters and how these have actually been around for a few years. Actually, let's just skip forward. We'll go to this from the website, thewarzone.com. The Warzone. It's TWZ.com if you're not watching and only listening. Boeing wins F-47 next generation air dominance fighter contract. Very cool looking picture or rendering right there. In the biggest development for U.S. Air Force tactical air power in more than 2 decades, Boeing has been announced as the winner of the service's next generation air dominance fighter initiative. That's NGAD. As the centerpiece of the NGAD effort, the new crewed 6th generation stealth combat jet, now designated the F-47, is set to change air combat forever, with the Air Force hoping to begin fielding it in the next decade. Boeing and Lockheed Martin have been facing off to build the NGAD combat jet, but neither company had formally confirmed it was competing. Northrop Grumman dropped out of the bidding process on its own accord to focus on other opportunities. And I think that might be all I wanted from this. But we are back to Boeing. We just talked the other day about how it was so bad for Boeing. The Financial Times even reported this last week about Boeing losing out on its business. They weren't able to go get the 2 astronauts stuck up there in space. Boeing wouldn't be able to do it. Therefore, we needed SpaceX to do it. But it seems like Boeing's all right. We had 2 years of Boeing planes falling apart, or so we were told. We had 2 years of stories about how Boeing was just consumed with DEI, and the company was falling apart, or so we were told. And now Boeing wins the contract to make the next generation fighter jets. We've been told that fighter jets are obsolete in total, that it makes no sense to have human piloted fighter jets in this era because we're talking about drone warfare. We may well be headed in that direction, and only in that direction. Why would you have humans if a drone can do the job more efficiently and you're not risking a human life while doing that job? And then, down the road, someplace after that, you then get to the point where the drone kinetic element is the front-facing kinetic part of cyber and energy warfare. And then you get into soft war and Bitcoin as defense technology and the rest of that. It's weird. The push toward the Bitcoin strategic reserve and the importance of cryptocurrency has been reiterated again and again. I would recommend, by the way, G Money. He just talked to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn last night on Rug Pull Radio over on Badlands. It seems like Bitcoin is ascendant right now for these purposes, and there is a weird almost deranged major push against that all over the internet, which is very strange. I don't know exactly what to make of all that. And just to be clear, I'm not sure. I'm not some kind of crypto expert. I'm not sure I'm right on that stance. I am convinced by the arguments and my thought process for how I analyze information as it's incoming leads me to believe that Bitcoin represents a maximal potential for what not only a currency could be, but then has these other use cases. And it seems like the obvious choice. And it also seems to be consistently and continually reinforced by Donald Trump and the people around him. So everybody's going to make their decisions on their own, but it really does seem like we are headed in those directions. All right. We are doing okay on time, I think. So if Boeing was falling apart as a company, one of our biggest defense contractors, they had a huge contract with Donald Trump to build 2 new Air Force One planes. And Donald Trump gave the story many times about how he negotiated that price down and down. He saved like $1.7 billion or something like that on it. And then Boeing is the DEI company. And then because Boeing is no longer a good company, they can't go rescue the spacemen from Gilligan's Island in outer space. So instead, we need Elon to provide the narrative layer on how those astronauts are going to get home. Was Boeing the problem? They're going to give us 6th generation fighter jets. And we heard about the F-35s. Remember when the F-35 just disappeared? Just gone. Like the Hunt for Red October submarine. Remember that? That was I think the very day Burning Bright and I did Hunt for Red October on Badlands Story Hour, which was very funny. Just an amazing coincidence. I'm not suggesting that's anything more than that. These stories, though, are relevant in a broader context. These are little snippets of the same narratives playing out. Imagine watching 100 movies at once. Everybody's like, this is a movie. We're watching a movie. And we may well be watching a movie in some sense. And we're probably all only watching our own individual movie because we don't have the capacity to watch other people's movies as it's coming into them. But if you had, it's funny. I used to have a job where I had to watch an array of televisions at one time and kind of know when anything was getting messed up on any of them. Almost like a security job, but it wasn't a security job. Imagine watching 100 movies at once, and you're not going to be able to take in all the information from each one of those screens as they all play out, but you're probably going to wind up with different little snippets. Maybe you're able to watch 10 seconds of the one movie, and then you watch a bunch of the other ones. You come back for 10 more seconds, and you watch the other ones, come back for 10 seconds, etc. If you do that, and they're all just replaying for 4 years, those snippets, whichever snippets you've seen from one of those televisions, you could think about all those little snippets and see if there's anything kind of cohesive that you could understand about what that movie was and what it meant. And I would suggest that that's probably how we are intaking information over these few years. So when we see Boeing is this, Boeing is that, Boeing planes fail, Boeing had this big contract, Trump negotiated them down, Boeing DEI, Boeing can't save the astronauts from Gilligan's Island in space, and now Boeing gets these next generation fighter jets. Man, all of these are parts of the same story. There's a way these things make sense. And I think that as we get down toward the resolution of many of these storylines, they're starting to not only make sense in themselves, they're starting to make sense in the broader picture. And then you would have to wonder whether the Boeing DEI stories were aimed at exposing the problems with DEI and then making people reject DEI, or if these were all takedown ops against Boeing and against some of these other companies to potentially thwart, like kill in the crib, deals like this. And I would again suggest that many of these deals were made years ago, including this one. And that was why I wanted to find this Ezra post, and maybe just hold for processing for a second. And perhaps I will be able to find this because I think it is relevant. Yes, here it is. Perfect. Let me just pull this up. So here we are. This is Rapid Response 47. The F-47, they're quoting Trump from the clip you just heard. The F-47 will be the most advanced, most capable, most lethal aircraft ever built. An experimental version of the plane has secretly been flying for almost 5 years, and we are confident that it massively overpowers the capabilities of any other nation. And Ezra A. Cohen, I had the opportunity to see this feat of American engineering up close and in action 4 years ago. It is a memory I'll never forget. 100% made in America. We have the best engineers in the world. The right stuff ethos lives on. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And we also covered the right stuff on Badlands Story Hour just a few months ago, as Steve Bannon was talking about the right stuff nearly every day on War Room at the beginning of the year. So the plane's been around for years. And now we have a deal that they're going to develop it, and we're being told it might get active in the next decade. And the story is that it is being brought out. The theater where it will be necessary is in the Indo-Pacific, because, of course, we are about to go to war with China. At some point, it all gets just a little bit exhausting. Now, we've been hearing about some of this blowback for Elon Musk. They're not going to convince us that Elon Musk's companies are beset with DEI-related concerns. There's not a wokeness issue in Elon Musk's company, so there has to be another way to go after them. And the promotion has been that we go after them, not we, but that they are gone after by Antifa-style domestic terrorist acts. So we have Tesla dealerships being set on fire. And this is Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project, who was suspended this week on Twitter for 30 days for, as you saw there, this post at the beginning, kill Tesla, save the country. That is Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy guy, promoting acts of domestic terrorism here in the United States of America. That is pretty incredible. Now, I am not for censorship in any way, and I'm not for Rick Wilson being taken down. I can't imagine anybody is actually listening to Rick Wilson. Here is The Daily Show, also themselves potentially promoting domestic terrorism, but certainly members of their audience here promoting domestic terrorism.
Of possible targeting Teslas and Cybertrucks. This dramatic video shows multiple cars in flames. Police say the attacker used Molotov cocktails. It's the latest in more than a dozen instances of arson and vandalism targeting Tesla.
The same suspect shot more Teslas with a gun. Tesla Cybertrucks were set on fire in Kansas City, and earlier this month, shots fired at a Tesla dealership in Oregon. Cybertrucks on fire in Seattle.
Wow, you guys like petty acts of domestic terrorism, huh?
Now, you can say he called them out, and to some extent he did, but petty acts of domestic terrorism. And it is domestic terrorism. We discussed that the other day. How do you handle these things? I'm not exactly sure how to handle these things. I'm not sure if prosecuting them as terrorism is the right move. I don't know how else you can deal with it. It is a law enforcement concern. Here is Pam Bondi of the DOJ.
People were locking up on that. We have someone in jail right now from one of the dealerships. They threw a Molotov cocktail through a dealership. They're looking at up to 20 years in prison. So if you're going to touch a Tesla, go to a dealership, do anything, you better watch out because we're coming after you.
Wow.
And
Well,
if you're funding this, we're coming after you. We're going to find out who you are.
Very bold, very movie oriented. That seems like the delivery of lines you might see in a movie. This is Zero Hedge from yesterday. Rogue Soros-funded NGO plots multi-city assault on Tesla as domestic terrorism escalates. So what we have are acts of purported domestic terrorism against the person with probably the second biggest microphone in the Western world, Donald Trump being the first. I would suggest Elon Musk is the second. Elon Musk's company, Tesla, a lot of people own Tesla vehicles. So Teslas are pervasive throughout society. Tesla is pervasive in the mainstream media narrative. And the fact that Teslas and Tesla dealerships are being constantly attacked is the sort of information, the sort of story element that will find fast saturation among the public. Everyone in America who is in tune with media and current events at all is going to know that Tesla cars and Tesla dealerships are being attacked. And so now we have the next layer on top. Everybody always says it's a conspiracy theory that George Soros is involved. The Soros Foundation is involved in funding these organizations that commit all these acts of domestic terrorism and violence, that wage these not remotely peaceful protests, that cause the disruptions at the town halls, etc. This is one of those things that it is going to become quickly impossible, I should say, to deny. So this is from Robbie Starbuck on Twitter in the Zero Hedge article. Over the next few days, you're going to see an organized progressional, I think that should say professional protest effort at Tesla stores put together by a group called Indivisible. So that is the exact same Obama and Soros associated left-wing activist group that was promoting the disruptions in Republican town halls, friendly Republican town halls, just a few weeks ago that we talked about on this show. George Soros Foundation has given Indivisible nearly $8 million for their activism. And he includes screenshots of various Tesla takedown event coverage. Libs of TikTok jumps in. Laura Loomer jumps in with this post from Congresswoman, we are told, Jasmine Crockett, the chick that was dancing, doing that ridiculous rap video, talking about how she wasn't going to attend the joint speech before the joint session of Congress.
I'll make sure that I keep it short, but I am truly here for very selfish reasons. Starting with on March 29th, it's my birthday. And all I want to see happen on my birthday is for Elon to be taken down. Yes.
All she wants for her birthday is for Elon to be taken down. Well, what does that mean? Fired from his government position? Do they want him killed? It's hard to know at this point. And as with all of our events that are at least partially psyops, you guessed it, trans people, Antifa, blue hairs, all of that, Molotov cocktails had by all connecting back to one George Soros and our stories, our narrative arcs are beginning to reach their climax and conclusion. And perhaps we will get into that resolution phase on Liberation Day, April 2nd. Maybe it's too much to possibly ever wish for that our psyops will begin to wind down in 2 weeks. But, oh, it would be wonderful. Let us go to Donald Trump yesterday in the White House in the East Room with a bunch of kids set up at their little school desks. And I believe that is an array of state flags behind Donald Trump.
I was very lucky. I saw another document that turned out to be very good for the country, and I said, let's use that same pen. I don't know, is anybody superstitious? Ron, are you superstitious? Let's use that same pen.
So Donald Trump is initiating officially the process to dismantle the Department of Education. It's funny, you actually see the rest of the kids are holding up their kind of copies of the executive order, and the little kid with the yarmulke on is still doing his homework. Very studious, very diligent. It's not anti-Semitic to say good things. Here is the fact sheet from the executive order, improving education outcomes by empowering parents, states, and communities. Did I grab the fact sheet? No, this is the executive order. I wanted to grab the fact sheet. Hold for processing. We're going to be there in just a moment. Here we are. Much better. The executive order directs the Secretary of Education to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education and return education authority to the states, while continuing to ensure the effective and uninterrupted delivery of services, programs, and benefits on which Americans rely. The order also directs that programs or activities receiving any remaining Department of Education funds will not advance DEI or gender ideology. Since its relatively recent inception in 1979, the Department of Education, which does not directly educate students, has spent over $3 trillion without improving student achievement as measured by standardized National Assessment of Educational Progress scores. Federal taxpayers spent around $200 billion in additional education funding during COVID-19, which, given the substantial learning loss that resulted, typifies the ineffectiveness of the current federally driven model. That is really incredible. $3 trillion, and it's hard to call it anything but a waste. Education has not improved. In fact, it's gotten worse. Outcomes have gotten worse, and $3 trillion has been spent. So what does the money go to? I would suggest it goes to implementing the global regime's agenda and bringing the education in all 50 states to whatever this centralized authority demands it become. They want certain things taught to everybody. They want to eliminate all the variety so that every child in America learns exactly the same things. It's honestly so dystopian. Donald Trump said, I want every parent in America to be empowered to send their child to public, private, charter, or faith-based school of their choice. The time for universal school choice has come. As we return education to the states, I will use every power I have to give parents this right. And so he has cordoned off certain elements of what the Department of Education does and then sent them to other departments. Health and Human Services, I think, for some of it, and the states will still be receiving federal funding. And he mentioned, I believe, Ron DeSantis in there, in that little clip you just saw. Ron published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal the day before, on Wednesday. I believe it was Wednesday. Someone can check me if I'm wrong. I apologize. It might have been Tuesday. But Ron argued that Florida had already done all of these amazing things about getting rid of wokeness and gender ideology, all of this stuff. Florida was, in fact, the leader. And Florida would have been right in the lead if today it had been Ron DeSantis, where Donald Trump is. And they would still be dismantling the Department of Education. And they would still be sending it back to the states because these things are changing no matter whose plan it was. Now, Donald Trump talked about how he was using that particular pen and he had used that particular pen for something else. Now, I don't know what that other instance of him using that pen would have been, but apparently that's an important pen. And if you think about what things would have been like in a different scenario where they were actually able to get rid of Donald Trump and put Ron DeSantis or someone else in his place, you really do have to wonder how this all would have gone down and what it means that Donald Trump is recognizing Ron DeSantis right there. Most people think, or would, the surface level interpretation would be that he is just giving props to Ron for all the good work he's done on education in Florida, but I highly doubt it. This is another fact sheet from an executive action from last week that we did not discuss, but it came up again yesterday, not only in relation to the issues with the legal community and the judicial system and legal system overall. And we will get to some of that, but we've seen numerous instances now, I think 3 different ones, Covington and Burling, Perkins Coie, and now this with Paul Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison. This from last week. This is the fact sheet from March 14th. Today, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to suspend security clearances by individuals at Paul Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison, aka Paul Weiss, pending a review of whether such clearances are consistent with the national interest. And so we have seen numerous instances of these. Skipping down, the Trump administration will no longer support taxpayer funding from sponsoring activities that make our communities less safe, increase burdens on local businesses, limit constitutional freedoms, and degrade the quality of American elections. Paul Weiss hired unethical attorney Mark Pomerantz, who had previously left the firm to join the Manhattan District Attorney's Office solely to manufacture a prosecution against President Trump. According to his co-workers, Pomerantz had unethically led witnesses in ways designed to implicate President Trump. After being unable to convince Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg that a fraud case was feasible, Pomerantz engaged in a media campaign to gin up support for this unwarranted prosecution. Paul Weiss had been accused of discriminating against its own employees on the basis of race and other categories prohibited by civil rights laws. So Pomerantz went from this law firm to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, where he attempted to manipulate witness testimony and to push forward the investigation and then prosecution that we saw as Law and Order New York, the loudest hush money. Let us continue. This is from Bloomberg. Back on April 18th of 2022, Trump prosecutor rejoins Paul Weiss after misguided decision. Mark Pomerantz, who quit the Manhattan District Attorney's Office after what he called a misguided decision not to prosecute former President Trump, rejoined his old firm. Pomerantz is of counsel in the firm's litigation department, a Paul Weiss spokesperson confirmed Monday. Pomerantz resigned in February after he said the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, had decided not to seek criminal charges against Trump at the time. I believe that Donald Trump is guilty of numerous felony violations, he wrote in his resignation letter to Bragg, according to the New York Times. In rejoining Paul Weiss, he brings to the firm his experience working on and defending white-collar and organized crime cases. As former head of the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office, he oversaw major securities fraud cases, including the prosecution of mob boss John Gotti. Really interesting stuff, and it got more interesting last night. I found this actually kind of shocking. And I don't mean in any bad way. I was just like, whoa. This is not something we've seen commonly with these Donald Trump-led interactions. Trump on Truth Social in the evening yesterday. Today, President Donald J. Trump agreed to withdraw his March 14th, 2025 executive order regarding the Paul Weiss, Rifkind, Wharton, and Garrison law firm, which has entered into the following agreement with the president. Paul Weiss agrees that the bedrock principle of American justice is that it must be fair and nonpartisan for all. Our justice system is betrayed when it is misused to achieve political ends. Lawyers and law firms play a vital role in ensuring that we live up to that standard as a nation. Law firms should not favor any political party when it comes to choosing their clients. Firms also should not make decisions on whom to hire based on a person's political affiliation. To do otherwise is to deny some Americans an equal opportunity for our services while favoring others. Lawyers abandon the profession's highest ideals when they engage in partisan decision-making and betray the ethical obligation to represent those who are unpopular or disfavored in a particular environment. Paul Weiss affirms its unwavering commitment to these core ideals and principles and will not deny representation to clients, including in pro bono matters and in support of nonprofits, because of the personal political views of individual lawyers. Paul Weiss will take on a wide range of pro bono matters that represent the full spectrum of political viewpoints of our society, whether conservative or liberal. Paul Weiss affirms its commitment to merit-based hiring, promotion, and retention, and will not adopt, use, or pursue any DEI policies. As part of its commitment, it will engage experts to be mutually agreed upon within 14 days to conduct a comprehensive audit of all of its employment practices. And this is where I think it gets really interesting. Paul Weiss will dedicate the equivalent of $40 million in pro bono legal services over the course of President Trump's term to support the administration's initiatives, including assisting our nation's veterans, fairness in the justice system, the president's task force to combat anti-Semitism, and other mutually agreed projects. Statement from the White House. The president is agreeing to this action in light of a meeting with Paul Weiss chairman Brad Karp, during which Mr. Karp acknowledged the wrongdoing of former Paul Weiss partner Mark Pomerantz, the grave dangers of weaponization, and the vital need to restore our system of justice. In response to the president's announcement, Paul Weiss's chairman, Brad Karp, said, "We are gratified that the president has agreed to withdraw the executive order concerning Paul Weiss. We look forward to an engaged and constructive relationship with the president and his administration." And Karp was a donor, a substantial donor, to the fake campaign of Kamala Harris. So we have a lawyer who left this law firm, went up to the Manhattan District Attorney's office, and then, and this is all supposedly at the behest of the fake and illegitimate president, Joe Biden, and he was not able to push Bragg into prosecuting Trump. He then left, returned to that law firm, and then Bragg prosecuted Trump in just the most blatantly fake trial you could ever imagine. I mean, it had all the elements of a trial. We were shown that there was a trial happening. Donald Trump used to come out every day and talk about the trial. And then, of course, I think that was the trial, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm pretty sure I'm not mistaken, where the person came out and lit himself on fire, and then the medical people just arrived and kind of flopped him onto a stretcher and took him away. He was able to get right to the front of the courthouse despite the fact that the president was there. And Trump said that all the police in New York were there guarding his trial, which is why they couldn't thwart the Antifa Hamas protests uptown at Columbia. If you think that's all real stuff that happened in the real world, and now it is being unwound to the point where, as punishment for Mark Pomerantz coming back to their firm, Paul Weiss, the law firm, has to be Donald Trump's butler, I don't know what to tell you. We are stretching the bounds of credulity at this point. I don't know how anybody believes this stuff, but it is an interesting and entertaining story. Let's watch Elon just one more time, and we'll see if I am right that this fits what we are dealing with today.
Generally, I find that the most interesting outcome is the most likely. Or said another way, maybe the most entertaining outcome, especially if ironic, is the most likely. It's almost like we're in an alien Netflix series that's trying to have the highest possible ratings. And like, if you think about it, like, that's kind of what happens, you know, which it doesn't mean it's always good. Because to your point, if you wouldn't really want to watch a show where things are great and stay great. I'm like, oh, that's boring. You want to watch a show where there's like a narrative arc where things go up and they go down, they go back up again, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen next. And I think we might be in an alien Netflix series here. So we're just going to keep the ratings up so we don't get canceled. All right, thank you guys.
So some great stand-up from Elon Musk. They're going to keep the entertainment value up so that they don't get canceled. Well, hopefully the show only has to run through April 2nd or, you know, maybe the middle of June at the latest. I don't know how much longer the show can go on, to be honest. Maybe it just goes on forever. And if that's the case, then I would suggest that we have just replaced Coke with Pepsi. We've replaced one brand of liars with another. And I don't think that we are at the point where we have to go down that path just yet. So as we get into the legal thing and as we get toward the end of today's show, this is the Associated Press today. Doge blocked in court from Social Security systems with Americans' personal information. For now, the federal judge on Thursday temporarily blocked billionaire Elon Musk's Doge from Social Security systems that hold personal data on millions of Americans, calling their work there a quote-unquote fishing expedition. The order also requires the team to delete any personally identifiable data in their possession. U.S. District Judge Ellen Hollander in Maryland found that the team got broad access to sensitive information at the Social Security Administration to search for fraud with little justification. The Doge team is essentially engaged in a fishing expedition at SSA in search of a fraud epidemic. Gosh, 3-hour mark kills me. Based on little more than suspicion. To be sure, rooting out possible fraud, waste, and mismanagement in the SSA is in the public interest, but that does not mean that the government can flout the law to do so. So, this information has always been accessible by federal government employees, and Elon Musk and his team are now federal government employees. And the funny thing is, as my pal Brian noted on, or maybe one of the viewers actually in a Rumble rant noted on Badlands Daily this morning, something like 80% of their work is already outsourced to government contractors, to private organizations that actually do the work. So companies outside the government already have access to this information. And then, of course, the other thing is that with the use of big tech, the use of computer platforms, the use of mobile phones, social media, the rest of it, they already have all our information. I would be absolutely shocked if by the end of this, we don't find out that the government is itself selling our personal information. Not that we don't give enough of it away on our own. We certainly do. But the insanity here. And so another judge has attempted to stop the executive branch from operating within its constitutional bounds. And then we have this from NPR yesterday. Judge calls woefully insufficient the Trump administration response to his order. Judge James Boasberg had earlier asked the Trump administration to provide more details about weekend flights that deported hundreds of alleged Venezuelan gang members and other people to El Salvador, despite his order to turn the planes around. He sought more proof the government was complying with his temporary restraining order, not that they had to. He asked the government to provide details about the flights or explain why such details fall under the state secrets doctrine. This privilege would allow the government to refuse to provide evidence that a court requests because doing so could harm U.S. national security or foreign relations. Boasberg initially gave a deadline on Wednesday and then extended it midday on Thursday. In an ex parte pleading delivered shortly after today's deadline, the government again evaded its obligations. An ex parte pleading means the filings went directly to the judge without notifying the other parties in the case. He said the government only provided a 6-paragraph declaration from a regional official in ICE that repeated information shared previously and added that, quote, cabinet secretaries are currently actively considering whether to invoke the state secrets privilege over the other facts requested by the court's order. Doing so is a serious matter that requires careful consideration of national security and foreign relations, and it cannot be properly undertaken in just 24 hours. Boasberg called the response woefully insufficient, saying, to begin, the government cannot proffer a regional ICE official to attest to cabinet-level discussions of a state secrets privilege. Indeed, his declaration on that point, not surprisingly, is based solely on his unsubstantiated understanding. So we can see that all of this is becoming very convoluted. The judge is asking for more information in order to accept that the government doesn't have to go along with his order that the government already doesn't have to go along with, right? So I continue to suspect that all of this is eventually going to spiral. We're going to see the so-called constitutional crisis we continue to be warned about. And the result of that will eventually be the end of all of these judicial usurpations of constitutional power from the executive branch and the legislative branch. Now, in regard to this situation, we talked about the Maduro statement the other day. I think that there actually are some really interesting parts of this Maduro statement, having had a chance to read it while I wasn't on air. And so we're just going to do a few paragraphs of this. The 1798 Alien Enemies Act, on which this presidential order is based, is an outdated law that not only violates fundamental and current laws of the USA, but also breaches international legal frameworks on human rights, the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all migrant workers and the members of their families, and the Declaration on the Human Rights of Individuals who are not nationals of the country in which they live. Its attempted application amounts to a crime against humanity. So Maduro, the very brutal dictator down in Venezuela, is accusing the United States of and accusing Donald Trump of crimes against humanity for these deportations. And he's making these accusations citing international law and agreements that support the global regime's top-down, centrally controlled system of mass immigration worldwide. The global slave trade operates on these understandings. It is these understandings that forces countries to keep the illegal aliens in country. He is accusing Trump doing his duty as president in his national security function as commander-in-chief, something that the people want him to do, the people who gave him the obvious and overwhelming mandate to do things exactly like this. Maduro, the foil in this situation, the enemy, quote unquote, in this movie, the villain, he is calling all of this a violation of all of these human rights declarations, the UN Charter, etc., and a crime against humanity. He's accusing Donald Trump of a crime against humanity. Okay? Therefore, doing the thing that the citizens of the United States want him to do in service of national security is a crime against humanity because of these multilateral agreements we have been offered into to support the global regime and its agenda. I would suggest that that situation is totally untenable. There is no way forward like that. Let us continue. The Venezuelan migrant who crossed our borders in search of alternative means of livelihood did so for economic reasons, which were a consequence of the hardships inflicted on our people by the criminal blockade imposed on our economy by Western governments against the entire Venezuelan society as part of their regime change plans in Venezuela. The vast majority of these migrants are hardworking, dignified, and honest men and women. They are not terrorists. They are not criminals. They are not enemy aliens. They are victims. So Maduro is saying that it is the West's own policies that have made people want to leave Venezuela for greener pastures because the West has waged economic warfare against the people of Venezuela. Venezuela rejects the persecution of our fellow citizens, the expropriation of their personal belongings, property, businesses, vehicles, and bank accounts. Likewise, we strongly denounce that our compatriots in the U.S. are being subjected to persecution in their workplaces, schools, churches, hospitals, and public spaces. And of course, if you're part of a global slave trade, you're probably not going to be treated very well in the final destination. With profound indignation, we repudiate the threat of the abduction of children under the age of 14. Never before in history has an official document summarily labeled children as members of terrorist groups considered criminals solely for being Venezuelan. And, these are narrative manipulations and very effective ones, but he's got a point. And then he says, Maria Corina Machado, Julio Borges, Carlos Paparoni, and Leopoldo Lopez and others make up the criminal core that has repeatedly called for the imposition of unilateral coercive measures against the entire Venezuelan people. And Maria Corina Machado was the woman they tried to Trojan horse into the Venezuelan presidency just last year with Venezuelan Joe Biden, supported by none other than Elon Musk, or at least amplified by Elon Musk. Maduro is saying she is the one who is helping to cause this. They consider one of their greatest achievements the application of this law against our migrants, just as they sought political gain from the suffering they inflicted on the people through sanctions. They are responsible for creating a criminal network of smugglers who, in exchange for the money of humble Venezuelan men and women, led many of our compatriots to various countries, including the U.S. So that is a powerful counter narrative and a pretty strong case to be made that it is actually the global regime and its evil twin faction in the United States of America causing these problems. And he is coming out against Donald Trump for what he says is a violation of these international multilateral agreements. He is attacking the global regime system right there, and their candidates, the candidates they try to empower, the opposition, quote unquote, that they attempt to empower through the color revolution playbook. And Donald Trump is his foil. Okay. Maduro is Trump's foil. Trump is Maduro's foil. Remember, Trump declared that Guaido was the legitimate president of Venezuela when he wasn't. He was simply the regime's opposition candidate to be installed through manipulations, as we've discussed at very long length with the International Crisis Group report and the rest of it. As far as I'm concerned, that is incredible. So Trump is Maduro's foil, Maduro is Trump's foil, and they are both at the same time going directly at the global regime and its system, in particular in this instance, the not only the cartels, the terrorist organizations, the private armies and of the criminal enterprise of the global regime, and their global slave trade and everything it's founded on, including the international law that keeps it in place. I think this stuff's incredible. Speaking of the illegal immigration problem and some of the solutions, this is Howard Lutnick talking to the super based and red-pilled tech normies at the All In podcast.
About 2 weeks from today, it goes out. Okay, Elon's building me the software right now.
Yeah.
Right, and then out it goes. And by the way, yesterday I sold 1,000.
Oh, you did? I got a poly market I created on how many you guys going to sell this year. So
cool.
I'm, curious to see how many.
That's fantastic. Do you want to tell people just the rough?
Yeah. What are the terms?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're a U.S. citizen, you pay global tax.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're not going to bring in outsiders going to come in to pay global tax. So if you have a green card, which used to be a green card, now gold card, you're a permanent resident of America. You can be a citizen, but you don't have to be. And none of them are going to choose to be. What they're going to do is they're going to have the right to be in America. They pay $5 million, and they have the right to be in America. They have the right to be in America. As long as they're good people.
And they're vetted.
And they can't break the law. We can always take it away if they're like evil or mean or bad or something. Not mean, but if they do something horrible, you can take it away, right? But the idea is, if I was not American, and I lived in any other country, I would buy 6. One for me, one for my wife and my 4 kids, because God forbid something happens. I want to be able to go to America, and I want to have the right to go to the airport, to go to America, and them to say, hello, Mr. Lutnick. Hello, Mr. Lutnick and the Lutnick family. Welcome home.
Right.
That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear I can't come here when there's a a horrible war, a horrible whatever.
Right.
I want to be able to go home, right? And once I'm home, I might as well build a business.
Yeah.
So you have the most productive people in the world going to start spending time here. They're going to have a family office. They're going to hire some people.
And you're not going to tax their external worldwide income.
I only tax the money they make in America, which is what we do now.
Yeah.
But their global income stays out.
And they pay $5 million. And how many people do you think there are that could qualify in the world? How
There are
many?
37 million people in the world who are capable of buying a car. In
That's
case you were wondering,
37 million. That's a lot more than ChatGPT told me.
who are capable of buying it.
Who are capable of buying it.
Now, I'm not saying they will, but they're capable of buying.
37 million people in the world capable of buying this gold card. I just want to get the numbers on that. That's, I think, God, that's in the trillions of dollars. Let me see if my math is right. I'm going to say that's $185 trillion. The machine says 185 trillion. Nailed it. That's like more money than all the money in the world. It's way more money than our current so-called national debt. And I wonder where that 37 million number comes from. I will attempt to find that out over the following days. But as I suggested right from the very beginning, it seems to me that this might be a drainage mechanism. They need to extract money from these companies who have been harming American workers and the American economy by bringing in all of these underpaid foreign immigrants to perform jobs that Americans can and should be doing, including in the H-1B situation that we found out about at the end of last year. And I have to wonder if a company like one of these major tech companies, for instance, if Google has had 5,000 H-1B workers and they were operating outside of the system or abusing the system somehow and then have to be punished or an amount needs drained or whatever it is, 5,000 times 5 million, that's $25 billion. Maybe they owe $25 billion. It can add up pretty quickly. And 37 million of them, could it be that that sort of thing has happened 37 million times in the United States of America? Could be. I find all this stuff fascinating. Again, just to be clear, that's speculation. I don't know those things. I don't know that this is what's operating behind the scenes. We're thinking about plausible possibilities for the future so that when that reality emerges, we are able to recognize it and understand what's happening in a bigger picture rather than just keeping pace with the mainstream media as it tells us what to think and what to believe. All right. So we are coming into the home stretch here. Let's get back to a little bit of the judicial stuff after that diversion. This is the Washington Post, I believe I want to say from yesterday. Oh, no, sorry, today, this morning. More than a dozen judges have said Trump and co. probably broke the law. We're not going to go all the way through this, but this part is hilarious. The judges say he probably broke the law. Do you think that it's antithetical to what we are led to believe is their professional standard of decorum, that they just go around opining that the president probably broke the law? From the start of his second term, President Donald Trump and his administration signaled a willingness, even a desire, to flout the law in their quest to overhaul the federal government. And while the wheels of justice turned slowly, less than 2 months later, a procession. Sorry, let's start that again. And while the wheels of justice turned slowly, less than 2 months later, a procession of judges have already ruled the administration has done exactly that. In more than a dozen cases and in 3 major rulings this week alone, the federal judge has ruled that the administration has either violated the law or has probably done so. And so that is where we are right now. These judges can file these, what Trump calls unlawful national injunctions, just on their belief that the administration has probably violated the law. And they can do that when it affects national security, when it affects who is employed by the federal government, when it affects what agencies are allowed to continue operating, the transgender ban, etc. That is just an incredible usurpation. Again, once again, that's the right word for it, by the way, of their authority. Donald Trump went ballistic on this yesterday. And this was right around the same time as he's firing off about Paul Weiss and the failing New York Times. All this was like in the span of half an hour in the late afternoon, early evening yesterday. I was just like, whoa, Trump is going off. And I mean, Trump is always going off. So seeing Trump go off relative to Trump going off is a good time as far as I'm concerned. Unlawful nationwide injunctions by radical left judges could very well lead to the destruction of our country. What does he mean by the destruction of our country? Is it going to change in some way? Is the country as we know it going to be gone and replaced with something else? These people are lunatics who do not care even a little bit about the repercussions from their very dangerous and incorrect decisions and rulings. Lawyers endlessly search the United States for these judges and file lawsuits as quickly as they find them. And he's suggesting that they figure out exactly what venue to bring these cases so that they will get the result they desire. So they'll find some judge able and willing to rule in a certain direction and bring the case to that judge, which means they then have to find the reason why it has standing in that court, etc. But they do that. This is a lawfare apparatus. It is then the obligation of law-abiding agencies of government to have these orders overturned. The danger is unparalleled. These judges want to assume the powers of the presidency without having to attain 80 million votes. They want all of the advantages with none of the risks. Again, a president has to be allowed to act quickly and decisively about such matters as returning murderers, drug lords, rapists, and other such type of criminals back to their homeland or to other locations that will allow our country to be safe. It is our goal to make America great again, and such a high aspiration can never be done if radical and highly partisan judges are allowed to stand in the way of justice. All caps, stop nationwide injunctions now before it is too late. If Justice Roberts and the United States Supreme Court do not fix this toxic and unprecedented situation immediately, our country is in very serious trouble. And yesterday it was revealed, by the way, that Justice Roberts is part of a secret society of judges called the Inns of Court. As if it could not get any weirder, it does. Trump also says Judge James Boasberg is doing everything in his power to usurp the power of the presidency. He is a local unknown judge, a grandstander looking for publicity, and it cannot be for any other reason because his rulings are so ridiculous and inept, and rulings is in quotes, save America. Hey, is Judge Boasberg just out there making these sorts of decisions so that we can have this problem illustrated for us in full? The world may never know, to quote a Tootsie Roll Pop commercial. Donald J. Trump this morning on Truth Social. No district judge or any judge can assume the duties of the President of the United States. Only crime and chaos would result. Make America great again. And it seems like they're perfectly fine with crime and chaos. They are planning a Take Tesla Down event for next weekend, just a few days before our Liberation Day. Are they trying to set the country aflame? I guess we will see. I hope not. I love being wrong about this stuff. The point in putting out in advance is that if it happens, we can know that it was recognizable in advance. This is the record of that being the case. And then we can understand that this set of thought processes, rather than having emotional reactions to whatever's on television, is probably a better way to go about understanding this aspect of our world. And the people out there trying to keep pace with the television, acting as though everything is breaking news all the time, these events that were clear and could be discerned for years now are just breaking news, always groveling for whoever's got more followers on Twitter, the people groveling for Elon Musk, people groveling for significant figures in the Donald Trump administration, kissing the asses of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, looking for retweets. Always, please, please pay attention to us. Then the influencers getting together and just feeding into the same system, reposting each other's nonsense all day long. No knowledge, no insight, nothing new. Just emotional reactions to whatever's on TV, impressing the people on the next level so they can impress the people on the next level. Finally, they'll be ascended within the party of false decorum. It is all just so tedious and embarrassing. Don't know why people continue to engage with it. I guess this is where we are going to be for a while. Hopefully it's not longer than a couple more weeks. At some point, got to turn off the television characters. Maybe it'll be soon. All right, everybody. Thank you for bearing with the technical concerns of today. I'm going to restream the feed, this stream in full tomorrow afternoon on Rumble. And then on Sunday, the full stream of Wednesday's subscriber stream will be playing on Rumble and on YouTube. And I will be back on Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic. And Joe Biden has never been president.
Well,
what?
You know who I am, don't you?
Well, you ain't Fiona Apple, and if you ain't Fiona Apple, I don't give a rat's ass.
What's wrong with being an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times? What do you think, Max?
Do you want to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times?
Yeah, I think I'd like to be an angry prophet denouncing the hypocrisies of our times.
It's not true. It's more true than I would perhaps prefer.
Down. We do a little trolling. It's called We Do a Little Trolling. What?
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.